There was a great nation that inhabited a giant island. Its lands were rich in everything. Its people lived in prosperity all the time. In the middle of the island was a palace that revealed the entire city. The island had a plain that was said to be more beautiful than all the plains. Near it was a hill that had no equal. Around the hill was 2 rings of land and 3 rings of water. The city has a wall of gold to prevent strangers from entering. The city's facades contain palaces, temples, and buildings covered with silver. Its columns are made of gold, and its lions are covered with ivory and decorated with gold, silver, and copper. It has 2 springs, a cold spring and a hot spring. The springs flow abundantly and never stop. There were ports on the outer rings. The ships were surrounded by residential areas that were bustling with life day and night, all under the warm sun. The island was ruled by 10 kings who met every 5 years to consult on matters of government and to decide on justice. Their military strength was unmatched. Like them, they ruled their central island and other islands. Their armies advanced towards the east and took over the north of the African continent up to the borders of Egypt. They headed toward the south and took over southern Europe up to Greece. Atlantis was living a life of obscene wealth and great wealth, but in one day and one night, destruction came upon them. They all drowned and the island disappeared, and her story ended. But before we begin, if you are new to the channel, do not forget to click and activate the bell so that you receive our videos first. What we mentioned in the introduction was part of the description that Plato told about the island of Atlantis, which was mentioned for the first time through the Greek philosopher and mathematician Plato in his famous dialogues named Timaeus and Critias. And Plato said that his teacher Socrates met with 3 people, Timaeus from the Greek city of Locri, and from the city of Syracuse, which is located on the island of Sicily. And Critias from the city of Athens asked them to tell him about the relations that existed between the ancient city of Athens and the countries that were in the world at that time, and how they dealt with each other. Pheidias told Socrates that his grandfather had met the poet Solon, and Solon told him that he had visited the priests in Egypt once, and the priests Egypt told them about a great island called Atlantis, the greatest civilization known to humanity in terms of technology, science, architecture, engineering, and astronomy. They described the city in an accurate description, as we mentioned in the introduction. According to the description of the priests, when corruption spread in Atlantis, the rulers of the city decided to conquer the whole world. But when they tried to enter the city of Athens, the Athenian army confronted them and defeated them. After the battle, something very strange happened. Violent natural phenomena began to appear in Atlantis, which they called the wrath of the gods. Volcanoes exploded, earthquakes broke out, floods submerged the coasts, and tsunami waves reached the heart of the city. It caused the destruction of the city and its complete drowning with all its treasure and all its secrets. Up until now, the only material evidence in the hands of humans regarding the subject of Atlantis is Plato's writings and the words he said. For this reason, researchers were divided into 2 teams, a supporter team and a mood team. A team confirms that Atlantis is real and that our Egypt will reach it one day, and another team. He says, guys, Atlantis is just a story told by Plato, a myth, nothing more. But I wonder if the first team is the one who is right, and Atlantis was actually real one day. Then I wonder if Atlantis existed in its place. Where would be the first possible place for sunken Atlantis, which is considered the most famous place? Absolutely, it is the depths of the Atlantic Ocean, and this stems from Plato's own words. Plato said in his dialogue that Atlantis is located in the ocean behind the Pillars of Hercules, and the Pillars of Hercules is a Greek description given to the area of the strait. Gibraltar, which separates the Mediterranean Sea from the Atlantic Sea. And apart from the story of Atlantis, researchers have long expected that in the past there were huge pieces of land in the heart of the Atlantic Ocean, which were considered a link between the 3 major continents of Africa, Europe, and America. And the reason for this is that there is a strange similarity in the ancient civilizations that existed on the coast of the 3 continents. They have the same astronomical knowledge. They have the same religious beliefs, and there is even a similarity in their huge buildings and structures, despite the fact that they are separated from each other by millions of kilometers of ocean water. There are even some animals and plants. They are found in places that are not considered their natural habitats, and someone moved them from their original place to another place. Since there is a vast distance of water separating these continents from each other, one of the logical explanations was that in the recent past there was a huge piece of land in the Atlantic Ocean, and it was the link between the continents of the ancient world. But for some reason, this piece of land disappeared. Come on, let's put this next to Plato's description of the area of Atlantis. Plato says that the area of Atlantis is not just a small city, and that's it, but rather that it was an entire continent that existed and disappeared. That's why many people say that there is definitely no place. The second one carries a whole continent except the Atlantic Ocean, and it is certain that Atlantis is the lost continent. The Atlantic Ocean has a very large area. We are talking about 106 million square kilometers. Is there a specific place in the Atlantic Ocean where it is expected that Atlantis was present? The truth is that there is more than one place. The most important of these places are the islands. The volcanic Azores are 1,450 kilometers off the coast of Portugal. There are 9 volcanic islands known as the Azores. They were discovered for the first time in modern times by the Portuguese in 1427. But when the Portuguese expedition reached the islands, they did not find any people on them at all. The islands were completely uninhabited, but the amazing thing is that there are antiquities and sculptures on the islands, and the remains of ancient ruins, and the remains of residential buildings that are thousands of years old. And we still do not know to this day which people or civilization they belong to. And for this reason, a group of researchers came out and said that this is the place where Atlantis was. And because of the natural phenomena that happened, nothing remained of them except for these 9 small islands. A plane or a ship passed through the Bermuda area, and there were those who let their imagination run wild and told you that the people of Atlantis themselves are still living under the Bermuda area in the water. And this hypothesis, despite it is of course their most exciting and interesting frame, but of course there is no evidence of its validity. The Bermuda area was killed by research from exploratory trips, submarines, industrial orders, and everything. We had previously done more than one episode about the Bermuda Triangle, in which we talked about the phenomena that it happens in the region, and we explained how these phenomena are natural and how much the issue is exaggerated. We even explained that there are ships and planes that pass normally through the Bermuda area and do not encounter any problems. Rather, there are other areas in the ocean that are dozens of times more dangerous than the Bermuda area. The whole issue is that the media is interested in the Bermuda Triangle. Bermuda is nothing more, and this is what made the region very famous for its people, but there is still nothing to prove that Bermuda has a relationship with Atlantis in the year 3600 BC and 200 kilometers southeast of Greece. There was an island called Sarah, currently known as the island of Santorini. This island had a people belonging to the Minoan civilization, which is considered one of the oldest European civilizations ever, dates back to the Bronze Age. They were a very wealthy people, and it was said that they were the first civilization in Europe to use the written language. They were distinguished in building roads and palaces, and they possessed advanced technologies that surpassed everything that the Greek civilization reached at the time. But suddenly, one day and one night, a huge volcano erupted on the island, accompanied by a strong earthquake and tsunami waves that completely destroyed the island, and the Manchu civilization ended completely. More than 10 million tons of rocks, ash, and gas spread into the atmosphere in an event that is described as the largest volcanic events in the recorded history of the Earth. The strange thing about the subject is that the scenario that happened with the island of Sirius is somewhat similar to the story that Plato told about Atlantis. Given that Europe separated the island of Sirius from the Greek lands, many researchers believe that this Atlantis was just a projection by Plato onto the island of Sirius. But from a Greek perspective, what is even more surprising is that researchers found on this island drawings and murals similar to Plato's description of Atlantis, rings of land separated by streams or lakes of water. A team of researchers then came up with a completely different idea. Is it possible that Atlantis was originally outside the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean region? All of these researchers say, yes, this hypothesis says that Atlantis may exist in the depths of Africa, in one of the locations that one would imagine Atlantis could exist in, which is Mauritania, in an area in the country of Mauritania called the Eye of the Sahara. This area is located in Three overlapping circles separated by a depression or something resembling empty water channels. In the past, it was believed that they were caused by a meteorite collision or that they were the site of an inactive volcano. But when researchers photographed them with a satellite, they discovered that they were very similar to Plato's description of Atlantis, especially since the size of these circles is very large, reaching about 35 how much. And for this reason, these researchers asked the question, is it possible that Atlantis was on land inside Mauritania?